this is an instant Nobel Prize, if it's true. And if you know what to look for right now, you can watch history being made in real time. Our story starts with a little-known basement lab in Korea that claims they've discovered a superconductor that works at room temperature and pressure. It's called LK-99, a discovery that impacts literally everything that uses electricity. Some claim this is lost Soviet technology, others say the lab got lucky, and a lot of people think it's fake. But no matter what, discovery of a room temperature and pressure superconductor would be huge. And there are soap opera levels of drama unfolding around this claim. It's Michael Jackson eating popcorn level. So hang in there and you'll learn a bit of history, some casual electrophysics, and why this discovery is science's holy grail. So superconductors, they have zero resistance, meaning electricity can flow 100% freely. Current, charges, electrons, they just kind of skip the toll lane and zip on through without losing any energy. But normally in electricity, there's resistive loss, and that shows up as heat. And that's why powered things get warm. That's loss. That's electrical power needlessly turning into heat and being wasted. And it actually limits what we can do with electricity because of that heat. We don't want heat. We don't want loss. We want perfect efficiency, and a superconductor gets us there. But it's more than just loss. Superconductors get really interesting in the world of magnetics. They repel and expel magnetic fields. Here's a piece of tin when it's too warm to superconduct, and then here it is again when it's superconducting. You can see these little compass needles have moved. There's no magnetic field through this when it's superconducting. This is roughly how maglev trains work. The superconductors suspend the train, and that's why all the LK-99 superconductor videos show this floating bit in a magnetic field, and then maybe they'll turn the magnet over underneath it, and it'll float the exact same way again. So here's what you should be looking for in these videos. You'll see the floating piece, and it doesn't necessarily care about the orientation of the magnet, but inside of this piece, it's creating an opposite magnetic field, causing it to float. Everything has this capability, but superconductors do it really, really well. It also looks cool on camera, hence all the viral videos. But who cares about all this nerd stuff? Why does it matter? To see the full potential of superconductors, you need to know a bit about electricity and magnetism, and you're on the right video. Thanks for being here. Electricity and magnetism are inseparable. They're BFFs. I know this better than most people because I had to take that class twice. But basically, you can't have an electric field without having a magnetic field. They go together. You just can't split them up. They're perpendicular. And this is one of physics' favorite right-hand rules. And there's more than one right-hand rule. You have your electric field vector, your magnetic field vector, and then the direction your field is moving goes along your thumb. It moves along and your magnetic and electric field vectors kind of wave as they go along, and that's why they call it an electromagnetic field. You buy one field, get one free. And this is kind of how everything works. Wi-Fi, Ethernet, cell phones, even light is an electromagnetic wave. Light is also a particle. We can thank Einstein for that, but we're not going to go there today. It's just all very spooky. But there are some fun things we can do with electromagnetics, like generate power, and this is how we have electricity. And I don't know about you, but I freaking love electricity. If you want to get fancy, this is Faraday's law and Lenz's law. These are kind of like Newton's laws of motion, but for electricity. And they work something like this. It's very simple. Take a conductor, something that electricity likes to flow through like a wire or a metal plate, and expose it to a changing magnetic field. Then you get current in the wire. That's the whole thing. A changing magnetic field, like maybe a spinning magnet, creates current in wires and other conductors that are near it. This is a magical property. But this is why wind turbines like to spin. When they spin, they're spinning big magnets around a coil or a coil around big magnets. The effect is the same. It doesn't matter if the magnet is moving or the coil is moving. As long as something is moving, we get electrical current. And current, much like knowledge, is power. We've known about this since the 1830s, so a little less than 200 years. That's like newer than modern democracy. So functional electricity is pretty new for humanity, and that's why we're still making these really cool discoveries like this. Anyway, that spinning is the same for coal and for natural gas and even for nuclear power plants. All of those things just heat up water to make things spin, to make turbines spin, to make wires and magnets spin. Hydroelectric dams, they have a big turbine at the bottom of the lake, and the water moves through the dam and spins a big movie boy turbine. It's all moving magnets and wire. But like really big magnets and really big wire for really big currents. And big currents mean big losses, which goes back to it being big hot. It big hot. And this is a bit reductionist, but you also have to take that big power from power plants and make it small power to run like your oven or your phone or your desk toy. All of this power conversion from big power to little power and AC to DC, it uses electromagnetics and has a bunch of loss also. Like there's maybe more loss in your neighborhood transformer than in the power lines to get the power there from the power plant. So here, right now, for me, they're burning natural gas a couple miles down that way to spin a big turbine and create a bunch of big power. They're then converting that down into little energy in the transformer outside my house. Also, we could run my little wavy fella. And we lost a lot of power between the natural gas plant and here. This concept is just ridiculous. I love this thing. Okay, focus. Back to superconductors and why they matter, and let's start with the big power. With a superconductor, you can make your magnets and your turbines a lot smaller and a lot stronger, which means a lot cheaper. And turbines aren't cheap. I found a website that sells used turbines, and they're like, I don't know, only $5 or $10 million used. So if we can make turbines smaller and cheaper, we can make our power cheaper, and we can make more power, and we're gonna need more grid power with like EVs and all sorts of we're just gonna need more power. But this isn't just a hand-waving theory. There's proof that superconductors can make these smaller and cheaper because it's already happening. In Europe, there's a funded project for a wind turbine called the EcoSwing that uses superconductors, and it's a lot smaller. Here's one of the engineers showing it off.
You can see the distance from the cover to the outer diameter of the generator here. And if we go to this one, you can see, well, I can't even reach it.
The normal turbine uses about 1,000 kilograms a ton, or 2,200 pounds, of neodymium in its magnet. The superconducting version of the turbine magnet uses about 1 kilogram of magnetic material, so 999 kilograms less, approximately. That's like $40,000 worth of neodymium magnets, which only comes from one country in the world, or about 20 bucks of gadolinium oxide superconductor on a fancy superconductor tape. It's like if turbines had duct tape, it would be superconducting duct tape. And this all works. If you remember back to our right-hand rule, we have our charge moving, and we have electrical and magnetic fields. So the more current you move, the more charge you move, the bigger these fields are. And if you can move a lot of current, we call this the current density, without it getting hot, you can make really good magnets and make a lot of power super efficiently. We also use superconductors in MRI machines and maglev trains like we mentioned, and even some quantum computers. More about those in a minute, but there's a catch. Today's superconductors only work when it's super duper cold. We discovered superconductors immediately after we discovered how to make liquid helium. The same guy figured them both out. In 1908, he got liquid helium that's minus 269 degrees Celsius, or just 4.2 degrees Kelvin. And then he was like, what if I put some stuff in that? And that is how he got a Nobel Prize. In 1911, he and his team stuck some mercury into the liquid helium and realized it had zero electrical resistance, the first superconductor. If we skip past a few more Nobel Prizes for superconductivity breakthroughs, if we skip past a few more Nobel Prizes for superconductivity breakthroughs and quantum stuff, we're now in the late 1980s, peak Stranger Things era, and there's a big discovery at IBM and more Nobel Prizes, of course, for high temperature superconductors. High temperature, Basically, these new 1980s superconductors work at temperatures that only need liquid nitrogen instead of liquid helium. So up to the balmy like minus 180 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Kelvin. Like honestly, if we're talking about degrees in Kelvin, it's just really cold. But now, if you want a superconductor, you only need liquid nitrogen. This is much cheaper and much safer to have than liquid helium, mostly just cheaper. So now we can have things like bullet trains or turbines that work as long as we have a bunch of liquid nitrogen on hand. It's still complicated, it's still pretty expensive, but it is doable. We also recently found out you can make a superconductor by squishing it really, really hard between some diamonds in like a special diamond press. It's not practical, but it's interesting. And now it's 2023. We're finally at the point where we can talk about the discovery in Korea. Congratulations, you made it to the juicy part. It's gonna get really good. They discovered what they're calling LK-99. They founded the lab in 1999. Two of the founders' initials are L and K, hence LK-99, a superconductor that works at room temperature and room pressure. It just works. There's no cryostat, no liquid gases to keep it cold, no crazy diamond presses. You can just hold it and put it under a microscope, allegedly. Assuming we can manufacture this at scale, and we don't know yet, but history tells us that if you can make $1 trillion if you figure out how to manufacture this, the smart people are gonna figure it out, and they're gonna make $1 trillion off of it. Once we can build it, we can just put superconductors into stuff. Anything that uses electricity can benefit, but there are a couple game changers that will really make a difference. First though, more about LK-99. A big reason I'm excited about LK-99 is that it doesn't need fancy or weird or exotic materials, just 4 pretty basic ones. Copper and red phosphorus to make copper phosphide, and then lead sulfate and lead oxide. Red phosphorus is kinda tricky to get depending where you are in the world because apparently people make some pretty nasty drugs with it. It's that red stuff on the tip of matches, but it's all relatively easy to get. Then you take all that, you kind of grind it up with like a mortar and a pestle, like you could do in your garage, and you cook it with some lab-grade ovens at 725 degrees Celsius. That's not too spicy, but it's probably not something you're gonna do at home, but you could. And then you put it under a vacuum and let it sit for a while, and then you let it cool. And a bunch of people are trying it right now as I'm recording this video, and we're starting to get enough results that it did finally make sense to make this video because it could actually be true. It might be fake, but it's looking pretty good, or at least interesting. We're getting what looks like some actual replications. Because finding a room temperature, ambient pressure superconductor is so important, it's actually been faked before, just recently. But it would be really, really silly of these folks to make a fake claim like this that's so easy to replicate. Like, if you're gonna fake it, in my opinion, you wanna make it really, really hard to copy. This one, LK-99, looks pretty easy. So the drama is not with the process, it's with the people. It's too soon to know the whole picture, but normally with a world-shaking discovery like this, you'd wanna make a big deal about it and publish a peer-reviewed paper in a big peer-reviewed journal where other professionals have checked your work and they don't think you're crazy. This announcement had none of that. There were 2 preprint papers that went up on a non-peer-reviewed pre-publication site called Archive kinda suddenly and on the weekend. Now, the weekend is when big corporations release bad news because no one's really paying attention and it doesn't hurt the stock price that much. It's not when you make a big happy announcement. So here's how it's playing out, and boy is it something. For LK-99, the paper was rushed out by one person, Kwon. He doesn't work at the lab anymore, but he was the CTO, and he pushed this paper out with 2 other authors listed. It's pretty common for stuff like this to publish with 3 authors because a Nobel Prize can only go to 3 people for a thing. So 3 authors, 3 people. Kwon lists himself as the 3rd author, along with Lee, the CEO of the lab and the company, and Kim, the R&D director. But Kwon didn't tell the other 2 authors what he was gonna do. He put the paper out without telling them. So Lee and Kim see the paper, I can only imagine those late night texts, and they say, "Ooh, don't like that. That paper has some issues. we don't like what Kwon's doing or saying, and our name is on this paper, so we better correct it. And within just a couple hours, they do, with their own paper and with 4 other authors. That's 6 authors total, and Kwon, the original instigator here who published that first paper, is not listed as an author at all on that second paper. He's basically been written out by Lee and Kim. Kwon's still fighting though. He even shows up at a conference uninvited and presents the findings like just a couple days ago. I don't know the motivations, and we may never know, but it's very possible this is purely defensive. Maybe Kwon got wind someone else was gonna publish first. I really don't know. But I do know there's often controversy around big discoveries like this. Here's a couple examples. When the telephone was patented, there were 2 patent submissions for a telephone that came into the US Patent Office on the same day. Alexander Graham Bell got there first and got the patent. When Newton published and invented calculus, a guy named Leibniz kind of published it first, and it was a whole thing and still kind of is. Darwin and evolution have a similar controversy. Similar issues for radio waves, relativity, like Einstein, yeah, quarks, sunspots, the existence of Neptune, oxygen, DNA structure, the light bulb. These scientific priority disputes happen a lot. But drama aside, LK-99 looks promising to me for a couple of common sense reasons. Number one, they started patent work on this in 2020. They filed for a patent, it's not brand new, and they tried also to get it published around that same time in the journal Nature. In the world of physics journals, Nature is the big one, the one you want to be in. But Nature wouldn't publish it because there had just been a faker, a fraud, and this lab in Korea is really honestly not that well known, and it has no precedent for being a physics powerhouse. So Nature wrote them off, pun intended. Common sense number 2, it's easy to make. Like if you're gonna fake it, make it hard to fake it. Let your spotlight last a long time, get the high paid speaking gigs, because that's the whole point of faking it. Eventually you're gonna get find out. And number 3, they are asking more people to replicate it publicly and pretty adamantly. Although they aren't really passing around their samples, and they're a bit vague about the specifics of heating and cooling and stuff. Kind of like trade secret recipes there a bit, but that's normal stuff for academic papers. So with that and the people drama, there is reason to be suspicious. We'll know soon if this is the real deal or a dead end or even just a step in the right direction. It's possible that maybe gold or silver will be better dopants than copper. Dopants, we haven't talked about that yet. This is how it all works. How LK-99 works. It's doping. It's doping. Not like Russia Olympics athlete doping. This doping is basically swapping out one atom for another atom in a crystal structure. In this case, it's putting a copper atom where there's normally a lead atom. We dope materials all the time. The device you're watching this on uses a doped semiconductor. That's just how semiconductors and modern transistors work. This isn't a 100% one-to-one identical situation, but again, doping's not a crazy process. We kind of know how to do this on some level. But here is how the papers say LK-99 works, what the doping does. It actually will warp the crystal structure by about 0.5%. That's not very much, and here I'm going to oversimplify a bunch of quantum theory stuff that I only foggily understand. Basically, it shifts the lattice enough to create a free passage tunnel highway for the electrons, or like waves of electrons. There's no resistance, there's no toll booth, it's just a straight shot through the crystal lattice. Normally, in a crystal lattice, like a metal, you have resistance. Electrons, they're negatively charged and they're bumping and opposing into each other. You know, like magnets that don't line up, they push if you try to push the south poles together or the north poles together. And these electrons are also attracted to and bumping into positively charged ions. And then of course the whole lattice is hot and shaking. And this is why we had to cool things down to like stupid cold to try and limit that lattice shaking, like roughly. But overall, all of this slows down the electrons. There are maybe some like wave physics where electrons pair up and act like a wave or like a boson. It doesn't really matter for this, other than there's a clear, straight shot, zero resistance path for electrons because we've kind of skewed the lattice a little bit. This concept isn't groundbreaking either. We know that when you squish or stretch a crystal lattice, you kind of change its charge layout. You change how close together the positive and negative things are. And this is actually how acoustic guitar pickups and ultrasounds work. But if you squeeze this LK-99 crystal lattice just right, that's like 0.48%, by swapping in that copper atom for the lead atom, you get an internal tension on the lattice that creates that stretch and creates these paths, giving you a room temperature, ambient pressure superconductor. It's honestly a little too soon to know exactly how the physics works or how to make it bigger and better, or if this is all just a false alarm, but it's looking pretty flipping good. With a superconductor like what LK-99 claims to be, we will see a quantum improvement in power generation, power conversion and transmission, sensors, sensing, and motors. It's like if we could just double our power capabilities, cut out fossil fuels, and do it cheaply. We could make MRI machines much smaller and cheaper and way higher resolution because more, better, stronger magnetic fields. That ring of an MRI machine is basically a superconductor tape again. Nuclear fusion has struggled with the superconductor temperature thing. Fusion is really hot, that's the point, because we gotta spin things. And superconductors, the ones today, have to stay super cold. And of course, quantum computers. A leading technology in quantum computing, not the only technology there, but a leading one, the one that like IBM and Google are using, uses superconducting qubits with Josephson junctions. I'm not gonna geek out on that too much, I'll spare you. But what you normally see as a quantum computer, that whole big chandelier tower, that's just the make it cold part. All the actual interesting things are happening down on that little bit at the bottom. There's maybe a world where you could get rid of all that chandelier nonsense, put a bunch of cryosat companies out of business, and just run that chip on your desk or in your computer. Maybe. But the motor and power stuff is, in my opinion, more interesting. Power storage is also another crazy application for superconductors. And here's a weird thought experiment, and I've thought about this since I was a kid. What if you had a box with perfect mirrors on the inside, and then you shine a bunch of light inside and then close the lid super fast, and now there's just a bunch of light stored up and bouncing around inside this box. Then you poke a little hole in it, and now you have a little flashlight as light leaks out of this box because you charged it up. We could actually do that with electricity. You could put current into a superconductor loop, and because it's a superconductor, there's no loss, no resistance. The current just keeps going in there for maybe literally all of time. But then, like when you want that power, you just tap into it. It's kind of like magic, but with the right superconductor, you could do this. The right superconductor. Because if you put too much current through a superconductor, you'll break it. You can't just run like amps and amps through this yet. It's called the critical current. This goes back to our right-hand rule. The current will create electric and magnetic fields, and if those get too big, they're basically just gonna break down the lattice and the whole thing's gonna like quench, I think they call it. So this could be it. This could be a breakthrough as big as the transistor, all starting from this little lab who is still today getting their act a little bit together, defying the odds, sticking it to big academia, and maybe winning themselves a Nobel Prize. The question for the next couple weeks, as dozens and dozens and dozens of labs work to replicate this, and as the LK-99 folks get their papers fixed up and patched up, is this conductor a super or a blooper? I'll try to keep you up to date in a pinned comment or maybe in the description, and maybe I'll even do a follow-up video if this keeps getting spicier. So if you want to see that and support this little science, tech, and engineering channel, the best way to do it is hit that subscribe